You are not required to marry me." Rosalind Whitmore tried to keep her voice steady, but it trembled anyway. The storm outside the narrow boarding house window rattled the glass with sharp bursts of rain. Wind pushed through the cracks of the old building and made the candle flame shiver in its holder. "I release you from my brother's dying request." Across the small rented room stood Marcus Ashworth, the Duke of Ashworth. He had not moved since she spoke. Water dripped slowly from the edge of his dark coat onto the uneven wooden floor. His boots were soaked with mud. It was clear he had walked through the storm instead of waiting for a carriage. The rain had darkened his hair and clung to the sharp lines of his coat, yet nothing about his expression softened. "Burden," he repeated quietly. The word was calm, but it carried weight. Rosalind forced herself to meet his gaze. She had never been more aware of how miserable her surroundings looked. The small room smelled of damp plaster and cold ashes. The hearth behind him was empty except for gray dust. The candle beside the bed burned low and weak. "You believe I came here out of obligation?" he asked. His voice was quiet, yet something in it made her stomach tighten. Rosalind chose her words carefully. "I believe my brother loved me very much," she said gently, "and dying men sometimes ask for promises without thinking of the burden they place on others."
For a moment, Marcus only looked at her.
He was taller than any man she had ever stood beside. Broad shoulders filled the narrow space. His face looked carved from stone. A faint silver scar rested near his temple. Her brother had described him often in his letters, cold as winter, unyielding. A man's soldiers followed without question. But Thomas had also written one thing more. He had called Marcus honorable. Rosalind prayed that part was true. "My brother asked you to marry me," she continued softly, "but I will not hold you to a promise made beside a dying bed." Marcus stepped farther into the room. The air seemed to tighten around him. "I am 26, she added, lifting her chin. "Plain, without dowry, without connections. I cannot allow you to sacrifice your future because a dying man loved his sister too much." For several seconds he said nothing. Then he moved. Marcus crossed the room and crouched before the empty hearth. Rosalind blinked in confusion. From his coat pocket he removed a small piece of tinder and a flint. Within moments sparks caught the dry wood stacked inside the hearth. A flame appeared. Then another. Soon a small fire crackled to life. Warmth slowly filled the frozen room. Rosalind had not felt real heat in days. Despite herself, her hands drifted toward the fire. Behind her, the storm roared over the rooftops of Cheapside.
"You are shivering,"
Marcus said. "I am quite comfortable, Your Grace." The lie hung awkwardly in the air. Marcus did not argue. He simply stood. The light from the fire rose behind him, outlining his tall figure in warm gold. "Thomas spoke of you often," he said. At the mention of her brother, Rosalind's throat tightened instantly. "He called you Rosie," Marcus continued. "His brilliant Rosie. The only person in England worth fighting for." Her breath faltered. "He saved my life," Marcus said quietly. Rosalind looked up. "At the Khyber Pass, I was shot through the shoulder. I could not hold a rifle. I could not ride." His voice held the calm certainty of memory. "Your brother carried me 2 miles through enemy fire. He was shot twice while doing it." Rosalind swallowed the sudden ache in her chest. "Thomas never told me that," she whispered. "He would not," Marcus replied. Silence settled again. Then Marcus reached inside his coat and removed a folded letter. "This is for you." Rosalind recognized the handwriting immediately. Her fingers trembled as she unfolded the paper. "Trust him, Rosie. He has waited for you longer than you know." Her heart stumbled. Slowly she lifted her eyes. "Waited for me?" For the first time since entering the room, something changed in Marcus's expression. Not warmth. Something far more dangerous. "Yes. I saw your portrait 7 years ago." Rosalind blinked in surprise. "My brother carried it in his breast pocket," Marcus said. "I asked who you were." "And he told you?" she asked quietly. Marcus nodded. "He told me about the sister who had been treated like a servant in her own home. He told me about the woman who deserved the world and had been given nothing." Marcus did not look away from her face. "And then I looked at the portrait. Rosalind could barely breathe. I realized something very inconvenient, he continued. He stepped closer again. That the woman in that miniature was the most extraordinary creature I had ever seen. Your Grace, she whispered. Marcus, he corrected gently. She froze. My name is Marcus. His voice softened. And when your brother asked me on his deathbed to marry you? Rosalind's pulse thundered. I said yes. She shook her head slowly. That is impossible. Marcus moved another step closer. You think I agreed out of debt? Why else? Because, he said quietly, I have spent 7 years wondering what your voice would sound like, and now that I have heard it, his hands tightened slowly at his sides. I find I cannot imagine leaving this room without you. The rain struck the window again. Rosalind's world tilted. You cannot truly mean to marry me, she whispered. Marcus Ashworth held her gaze. Then, to her complete shock, he dropped to his knees. For several seconds, Rosalind could not move. A duke knelt before her on the rough floor of a rented room that smelled of damp wood and candle smoke. The fire crackled behind him. Rain battered the window. Marcus remained perfectly still. Marry me, he said. The words held no drama, yet the certainty in them made her heart pound. This cannot be real, she whispered. Marcus looked up at her. In the firelight, she saw what she had missed before. The tiredness in his eyes, the faint shadows beneath them. A man far too young to carry such weight. I assure you, he said calmly, nothing in my life has been more real. You do not know me. I know enough. You know a portrait. I know a woman who survived 26 years of neglect with dignity. His voice softened slightly. That is enough for me to begin. Rosalind clasped her hands together. You are offering me a life I cannot accept. Marcus remained kneeling. Explain. I would forever remind you of a promise made beside a dying bed. Marcus's mouth curved faintly. I regret many things in my life, he said. This will not be one of them. You cannot know that. I can. His voice lowered. Because I agreed before Thomas even asked. Her breath caught again. I agreed the moment I saw your face 7 years ago. Silence filled the room. Rosalind stared at him as if he had spoken madness. You have imagined me, she said softly. Created someone who does not exist. Marcus stood. The movement was smooth and controlled, like a soldier rising after battle. I imagined a woman who was kind, he said. He stepped closer. I imagined someone brave. Another step. Someone loyal. He stopped directly before her. Now I meet a woman who would rather freeze in poverty than accept help she believes she has not earned. His gray eyes searched hers, and I find the reality far more compelling than the fantasy. Heat rose beneath her skin. You are speaking recklessly. I rarely do. You have known me less than half an hour. You have known me the same amount of time, he replied. That is different. Yes. His gaze darkened slightly. You have far less to lose. That was true. In 3 days, she would lose this room. 3 days before hunger decided the rest of her future. Marcus watched realization cross her face. I am not asking for love, he said quietly. Her eyes lifted. I am asking for time. Time? A year. She frowned. A year in my household as my wife. The word echoed strangely in the small room. If after that time you cannot bear my presence, he continued, you may leave with enough money to live however you wish. You would grant me freedom? Yes. And your reputation? He shrugged slightly. My reputation is already considered alarming. She almost smiled. You are serious. I always am. She studied him carefully. You would share a home with a woman who may never love you. Marcus held her gaze. I have waited 7 years to meet you. His voice softened. I believe I can endure 12 months. The sincerity unsettled her, more than arrogance would have. Rosalind turned toward the fire and stared into the flames. All her life she had been careful, quiet, invisible. Yet here stood a man offering a future she had never imagined. "You are very certain," she said slowly. "Oh, I am certain of you. You barely know me. I know your brother trusted you with his final breath." Marcus stepped closer. "And when you told me I was free to leave, you meant it. That tells me more about you than any season in London ever could." The fire cracked loudly. Rosalind exhaled slowly. Then she turned back to him. "If I accept," she said carefully, "I will not be a silent ornament in your house." Marcus raised a brow. "I intend to manage your estates, learn the accounts, understand the tenants." The corner of his mouth moved slightly. "Excellent. You are not offended. I am relieved." "Relieved? Yes. I have no desire to marry a decorative fool." Rosalind stared at him. "You are an extraordinary man, Your Grace." His expression sharpened. "Marcus." She hesitated, then quietly said it. "Marcus." Something flickered in his eyes. "Good," he murmured. Outside, the storm began to fade. Rosalind drew a long breath. Then she spoke the words that changed everything. "Yes." Marcus froze. "You will marry me." "Yes." For the first time that evening, the Duke of Ashworth looked genuinely shaken. He reached for her hand slowly. "Rosie." But before he could say anything more, a sudden knock struck the door. Sharp, urgent. Both of them turned. Neither yet understood that the news waiting outside would change the course of their lives forever. The knock came again, louder this time. Marcus's hand tightened briefly around Rosalind's wrist before he released her. "Stay here," he said quietly. The command was instinctive and calm. Rosalind folded her hands together as Marcus crossed the small room and opened the door. A boy stood in the narrow hallway. He was soaked through and breathing hard as if he had run through half of London. He could not have been more than 14. "Your Grace," the boy stammered. Marcus's expression sharpened immediately. "What is it?" "A letter, sir. Urgent." The boy held out a damp envelope. Marcus took it. The wax seal had already broken from the rain. For a moment, he simply stared at the handwriting. Something changed in his face. Not fear. Something heavier. "Who delivered this?" Marcus asked. "A messenger from Derbyshire, sir." Marcus handed the boy a coin and closed the door. Rosalind watched him closely. "You look troubled." Marcus did not answer right away. Instead, he unfolded the letter and read it carefully. His eyes moved quickly across the page. Then he exhaled, not relief, something darker. "What has happened?" Rosalind asked. Marcus folded the letter slowly. "My steward writes from Ashworth Hall." "The estate?" "There has already been discussion about what you and I intend to do." Rosalind felt a quiet chill crawl along her spine. "Ah," she said softly. Marcus studied her. "You expected this?" "Of course." She moved closer to the fire. "When a duke marries a penniless spinster from Cheapside, people will have opinions. They will have silence. You cannot silence half of England." "I can try." Rosalind almost smiled. "What exactly does your steward say?" she asked. Marcus hesitated. "He reports that several members of my extended family have begun making inquiries." "Inquiries?" "They wish to know if the rumor is true." Rosalind lifted her chin. "And if it is, they believe I am acting out of grief for your brother." Marcus's expression hardened. "They think I will reconsider." "They are mistaken," he said quietly. The certainty in his voice warmed her unexpectedly. "Still," Rosalind said gently, "there will be scandal." Marcus stepped closer. "I am a duke."
"Yes!"
"I do not require society's approval." "Perhaps not," Rosalind replied. But your future Duchess might. You fear humiliation? I am accustomed to humiliation, she said calmly. I simply prefer not to bring it into your house. Marcus stared at her as if the idea offended him. You will not be humiliated. You cannot guarantee that. Yes, he said softly. I can. Rosalind looked at him carefully. Marcus Ashworth carried the presence of a man who believed entirely in his own power, not arrogance. You are very confident, she said. I am very patient. He placed the letter aside. The wedding will take place quietly. How quietly? A special license. Her eyes widened. That requires the Archbishop's approval. Marcus's expression did not change. It will be arranged. Rosalind studied him again. You move very quickly. That answer silenced her. The firelight moved across his face. For the first time, Marcus seemed slightly uncertain. Do you regret saying yes? The answer came instantly. His shoulders relaxed. Good. Rosalind glanced toward the window. The rain had slowed. Gas lamps flickered through the wet glass outside. I must pack, she said. Marcus frowned. Pack? I was informed this morning that I must vacate this room in 3 days. Marcus went completely still. 3 days? Yes. She said it simply. I sold my shoes this morning to pay for another week of rent. Silence filled the room. Rosalind watched something dangerous ignite behind Marcus's gray eyes. You sold your shoes. It seemed practical. Marcus crossed the room in 2 long strides. Before she understood what he intended, he knelt, not ceremoniously. He simply dropped to one knee. Then he gently lifted the hem of her worn skirt just enough to see her feet against the cold boards. Bare. His jaw tightened. Marcus, she said softly, you have been walking through London barefoot. It is hardly unusual for a woman in my circumstances. Marcus stood slowly. Every line of his body had hardened. That ends tonight. I do not expect. His voice had grown very quiet. You will never again sell anything simply to survive. Rosalind swallowed. You cannot rewrite the past. No. Marcus looked down at her with fierce intensity. But I can control the future. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Then, unexpectedly, Rosalind laughed. Marcus blinked. You find this amusing? No, I find you astonishing. Something warmer entered his expression. You will become accustomed to me. I doubt that. Marcus studied her quietly. Then he said something that made her heart stumble. I hope you never do. The word hovered silently between them, but neither of them yet knew that their greatest challenge had already begun. Rang across the hills of Derbyshire. Rosalind Whitmore stood inside the ancient chapel beside the man who had changed her life with a single knock on a door. The chapel was centuries old. Stone walls rose toward a dark vaulted ceiling. Candles burned along the aisle, their golden light reflected against the marble tombs of Ashworth ancestors. The scent of white roses filled the air. Marcus had ordered them cut that morning from the winter gardens. Rosalind stood beside him wearing ivory silk. The gown had been made in Bond Street only days earlier. The fabric shimmered softly beneath the candlelight. A delicate veil rested over her shoulders. Sapphires from the Ashworth family collection glimmered gently at her throat. She barely recognized herself. But Marcus had not taken his eyes off her since she entered the chapel. Not once. The vicar cleared his throat. Your Grace. Marcus seemed to return from a distant thought. Yeah. The ceremony began. The familiar words of marriage echoed softly through the chapel. Duty, honor, promises spoken by countless couples before them. Yet when Marcus repeated his vows, his voice carried something deeper than formality. With this ring, he said quietly as he slid the gold band onto her finger, I wed. Rosalind's hand trembled. The ring felt warm, real. The vicar completed the blessing. You may kiss your wife, Your Grace. Marcus hesitated for a brief moment. Then he lifted her veil. His hand touched her cheek. Steady. But his eyes held something that made her breath catch. Not triumph. Relief. He kissed her gently, soft and careful. When he stepped back, the small gathering of witnesses applauded politely. The Countess of Penton smiled. Marcus's steward bowed his head. The marriage was complete. Rosalind Whitmore was now the Duchess of Ashworth. Yet the true weight of that transformation did not settle until later that evening. The guests had departed. Ashworth Hall had grown quiet. Fires burned in every hearth. Rosalind stood beside the tall drawing-room windows, watching snow fall across the estate gardens. Behind her, Marcus poured 2 glasses of brandy. "You should sit," he said. "I am perfectly well. You have endured a wedding, an entire household of curious servants, and 3 hours of introductions to relatives pretending to be pleased." His voice softened. "You may sit." She smiled slightly. "Very well." Rosalind lowered herself onto the sofa. Marcus handed her the brandy. Their fingers brushed. The brief contact lingered longer than it should have. For several moments, neither spoke. Then Marcus cleared his throat. "There is something you should understand about marriage." Rosalind looked up. "In English law," he said quietly, "a wife's property becomes her husband's." She nodded. "I know. Any income you earn legally becomes mine. I know that as well. And yet, you still married me." Rosalind held his gaze. "You offered me freedom after 1 year." "Yes, and I believed you meant it." Marcus looked slightly startled. "I did. Then I trust you." Something complicated moved in his expression, but before he could answer, there was a knock on the door. Marcus frowned. "At this hour?" The housekeeper entered carrying a letter on a silver tray. "For the Duchess." Rosalind froze. "The Duchess?" "Mrs. Burrell." Oldworth smiled kindly. "Yes, Your Grace." Rosalind took the envelope slowly. The seal broke beneath her fingers. She unfolded the paper. The color drained from her face. Marcus stepped forward immediately. "What is it?" He read it once, then again. When he finally looked up, his expression had turned to ice. "It appears," he said quietly, "that your stepmother has heard of our marriage." Rosalind closed her eyes briefly. "I expected this." Marcus returned the letter to her. "She is coming to Ashworth Hall." Rosalind read the final line again. Her stepmother's elegant handwriting seemed to mock her. "I will be bringing Sophia with me, of course." Marcus watched her carefully. "You are very calm. I knew she would come." "Yes," Marcus said. His jaw tightened, "but I did not." Rosalind looked up. "What do you mean?" Marcus's voice grew very quiet. "It means Lady Whitmore has decided to insult my wife in my own house." The room seemed to shift around them. Rosalind suddenly remembered every cruel word her stepmother had ever spoken, every humiliation, every moment she had been told she was worthless. And now that same woman was coming to Ashworth Hall. Marcus stepped closer. "You need not worry." Rosalind lifted her chin. "I am not worried." His brow rose slightly. "No?" She folded the letter neatly. "If my stepmother wishes to see what became of the girl she discarded," she said calmly, "then I believe we should welcome her." Marcus studied her for a long moment. Then slowly he smiled, and the smile was not gentle. "Very well, Duchess." Outside, the snow continued to fall across the vast grounds of Ashworth Hall. Neither of them yet understood that Lady Whitmore's arrival would soon ignite a battle that would test their new marriage in ways neither of them expected. Lady Whitmore arrived at Ashworth Hall 3 days later. The carriage rolled slowly up the long gravel drive just before noon. Frost still covered the estate lawns, and the winter sun shone weakly through the pale sky. 2 liveried footmen opened the carriage door. Rosalind stood at the top of the great marble staircase, watching calmly. Marcus stood beside her. He had insisted. "You will not greet her alone," he had said earlier. Rosalind had tried to protest. "I have greeted her alone my entire life." Marcus had only shaken his head. "That ends today." Now his hand rested lightly at the small of her back. The touch was subtle but firm enough to remind everyone exactly where she stood. The front doors opened. Lady Whitmore swept inside with perfect confidence. Lavender silk rustled around her as she stepped onto the marble floor. Fox fur framed her shoulders and her posture remained elegant as ever. Beside her stood Sophia, tall, golden-haired, beautiful. Sophia had always been the daughter displayed proudly to society. The contrast between the sisters had once been painfully obvious. Rosalind felt the old shadow of doubt rise in her chest, but she pushed it away. That life was over. Lady Whitmore stopped at the bottom of the staircase. For a moment, she simply stared. Rosalind began walking down slowly. The sapphire necklace at her throat caught the light with every step. The ivory silk of her gown moved gracefully around her feet. By the time she reached the final step, the transformation was undeniable. She was no longer the forgotten girl hidden in the background of her stepmother's house. She was the Duchess of Ashworth. Lady Whitmore recovered quickly. "My dear Rosalind," she said with a sweet smile. "How extraordinary." Rosalind inclined her head. "Lady Whitmore." Sophia curtsied politely. "Your Grace." His calm expression carried the patience of a soldier observing enemy movement. Lady Whitmore's eyes moved toward him. "Your Grace," she said smoothly. "We were quite shocked to hear the news." Marcus nodded politely. "I can imagine. It was terribly sudden." It was. Lady Whitmore folded her hands. "That is precisely why we wished to visit." Rosalind already knew what would follow. Lady Whitmore's voice softened. "You see, I feared this marriage may have been impulsive." Marcus's eyes hardened slightly. "Impulsive?" "Yes," Lady Whitmore continued. "My late stepson was very dear to you. Grief can influence even the wisest decisions." The insult hung politely in the air. Marcus did not respond immediately. Instead, he turned slightly toward Rosalind. "Duchess," he said quietly, "would you prefer to continue this conversation privately?" "No." She looked back at her stepmother. "I believe the entire household may listen if they wish." "Rosalind, you misunderstand. I only wish to ensure the Duke fully understands the circumstances of your upbringing." Marcus finally spoke. "I assure you I understand them very well." Lady Whitmore's smile tightened. "I simply mean that Sophia, for example, has had the benefit of a proper London season and a refined education."
Sophia flushed slightly.
Mother.
"Hush, darling," Lady Whitmore continued. "A duke's household can be quite demanding." Marcus took one slow step forward. "Indeed." Lady Whitmore brightened slightly, mistaking his tone. "And of course, if your Grace ever felt the match was unsuitable." "Unsuitable," Marcus repeated softly. Rosalind felt the shift in the air immediately. Lady Whitmore continued boldly. "There are ways to correct unfortunate decisions before they become permanent." Marcus smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. "Lady Whitmore," he said calmly, "are you suggesting I replace my wife?" The hall fell silent. "My mother did not mean." Lady Whitmore rushed forward. "I mean only that Sophia is widely admired in society and—" Marcus's voice cut across hers, cold. "My wife is the Duchess of Ashworth." Each word landed with weight. "She will remain the Duchess of Ashworth." Lady Whitmore opened her mouth again. Marcus did not allow her to speak. "And if anyone suggests otherwise again in my presence," he added quietly, "they will regret it." The silence that followed was absolute. Lady Whitmore attempted a weak laugh. "There is no need for such severity. You meant to humiliate my wife in her own house," Marcus replied. "I would never." "You did." Rosalind stepped forward slightly. "Perhaps we should continue this conversation in the drawing room," she said calmly. Marcus nodded. Within minutes they sat beside the great marble fireplace of Ashworth Hall. Tea was served. No one touched it. Lady Whitmore forced a smile. "Your Grace, I fear there has been a misunderstanding." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "Explain it." "Why?" "My concern is for your reputation." "My reputation survived the Afghan campaigns," Marcus replied. "I suspect it will survive my marriage." Lady Whitmore's patience began to crack. "You must admit the circumstances are unusual. A duke marrying a woman who has never even attended a London season." Marcus turned his head slightly toward Rosalind. "Does that trouble you?" "No," Rosalind answered calmly. "No, It does not trouble me either, Marcus said. Lady Whitmore's patience snapped.
Society will question this marriage. Marcus's voice became very quiet.
Society does not question me. The room fell silent again. Rosalind watched her stepmother carefully. For years, this woman had controlled her life with cruelty and quiet humiliation, but that power no longer existed here. Still, Rosalind did not want revenge. She only wanted truth. Lady Whitmore, Rosalind said calmly. Her stepmother turned. Yes? There is something you should know. Marcus glanced at her with curiosity. Rosalind folded her hands. My husband's solicitor recently reviewed several financial documents from my father's estate. Lady Whitmore went very still. Sophia looked confused. What are you talking about? Marcus spoke softly. 700 pounds. Lady Whitmore's teacup slipped from her hand and shattered against the floor. The room went silent. Rosalind's voice remained steady. My mother left that sum in trust for my future. Sophia's eyes widened. Mother? Lady Whitmore's face had turned pale. Marcus slid a small folder onto the table. Our solicitor also discovered several forged signatures. He placed the papers calmly before her. Curious, is it not? Lady Whitmore stared at the documents. This is absurd. Is it? Marcus's voice remained dangerously quiet. Forgery is a criminal offense. Sophia gasped. Mother, you didn't? Lady Whitmore stood suddenly. You have no proof. Marcus slid another paper forward. Witness statements. Her hands trembled. Rosalind watched the woman who had ruled her childhood begin to collapse under the truth. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Marcus leaned forward. You have two choices. Lady Whitmore's voice shook. What choices? A public prosecution. His gray eyes were merciless. Or a private resolution. The room felt smaller. Sophia whispered softly. What does that mean? Marcus answered calmly. It means Lady Whitmore repays every stolen pound. Rosalind felt the shift of power settle around her. Lady Whitmore stared at Marcus. You would destroy us. You destroyed her first. The silence that followed was sharp, but Marcus was not finished. Lady Whitmore's shoulders sagged. What do you want? Marcus placed a document on the table, a written confession, and repayment of the money. He paused, and a signed agreement that you will never again interfere in my wife's life. Rosalind noticed the words carefully. My wife. Lady Whitmore stared at the paper. If I refuse? Marcus's voice softened. Then the courts will decide. Oh, God. Then Lady Whitmore picked up the pen. Her hand shook as she signed. The sound of the pen scratching across paper echoed through the quiet room. When she finished, Marcus folded the document neatly. It will be delivered to my solicitor. Lady Whitmore did not look at Rosalind again. She simply walked toward the door. Sophia hesitated. Then she turned back. I am sorry, she whispered. Rosalind studied her stepsister. You were a child, she said gently. Sophia nodded and followed her mother out. The door closed. The house grew silent. Marcus exhaled slowly. I apologize if my actions were excessive. Rosalind turned toward him. You destroyed her. There was no regret in his voice. Rosalind stepped closer. You would have done it even if I asked you not to. Yes. Why? Marcus looked at her as if the answer were obvious. Because she hurt you. Warmth spread through Rosalind's chest. You are terrifying, she said quietly. Marcus almost smiled. I have been told that. She reached up and touched his cheek. The small gesture made him go completely still. You do not need to fight every battle for me, she said softly. I know, Marcus replied, but I will always stand beside you. Her heart tightened. And they will come. Rosalind smiled gently. Then we will face them together. Marcus studied her quietly. Then he took her hand. "I waited 7 years to meet you."
His thumb brushed the ring on her finger.
"And now that I have you," he said softly, "I have no intention of letting you disappear again." "Then, I suppose," she said gently, "we must learn how to live with that." Outside, the winter sun spread across the grounds of Ashworth Hall, and for the first time in her life, Rosalind Whitmore understood something her brother had always believed. She had never been invisible. She had only been waiting for someone who truly knew how to see her.